Gee, Dad, did you change your mind and are you going with me after all?
No, I wish I could. I'm just going out to the club later for a little practice. Oh, here are the letters I promised you, Jimmy. Now listen, son. I'm sending you out to the National Shooting Championships because I want you to learn how to shoot and how to handle a gun safely. These letters will introduce you to friends of mine who will look after you at each match. Of course, Mary will join you at Camp Perry. Where are Mary and your mother? Are you all packed and ready?
Bags in the car. Mom and Mary are outside.
Oh.
Goodbye, dear. Oh, Jimmy, that hair.
It won't stay down, Mom. Mary, you sure we got time to make that plane?
Give your shirt on. I'll get you there in plenty of time.
Now, Jimmy, do be careful and do exactly what your father's friends tell you to do.
I will, Mom. Gee, Dad, I wish you could go, too.
So do I, Jimmy, but I'll have to stay close to the hospital for a while. But we'll have some hunting together this fall.
Swell. Bye.
Here we are over the mecca of all trap shooters, the home grounds of the Amateur Trap Shooting Association at Vandalia, Ohio, where the Grand American Handicap Tournament is being held. Once a year, contestants flock in here from all corners of the compass, singly and in teams. They come by train, by trailer, by automobile and airplane. Here, railroad presidents and bank directors stand shoulder to shoulder with mechanics and clerks on an equal footing of good fellowship and good sportsmanship in this most democratic of sports. One of the letters given to Jimmy by his dad was addressed to Ned Lilly, winner of the many trap shooting championships. Here are Ned and Jimmy now. They're coming out to one of the practice traps where they won't be disturbed while Ned gives Jimmy a few pointers on how an expert handles a gun at the traps. Jimmy learns from Ned the rules of safety and courtesy followed by all trap shooters. Keep the muzzle of the gun pointed where it should be pointed, above the trap house and away from fellow shooters and spectators. Load it only when you're ready to shoot. Carry it with the breech open when not in firing position. And now Jimmy gets a close-up of Ned's shooting stance and a chance to watch him smash target after target into smoke. Jimmy is close enough to see how Ned aims and follows the target as it comes from the trap house, how he swings his gun, and how he pulls the trigger. Jimmy watches Ned swing his gun with practiced eye and smooth coordination along the line of target flight, pulling the trigger as he swings past the target. Experience and practice have made the speed and timing of Ned's swing automatically right for every angle the target may take as it leaves the trap. Ned makes trap shooting look easy and safe, too, as it is for the many shooters who follow the simple rules of proper gun handling. This is how the Grand American firing line looks during the height of the tournament. Nearly 1 million shots are fired during these events. There is continuous gunfire punctuated with the calls for targets and the voices of the referees calling the shots. In handicap tournaments, such as the Grand American, many of the events are shot at handicap distances from the trap house. This varies with each shooter's ability, from 16 yards back to 25 yards. Let's watch Ned's squad in action. Here they are, all expert shots. Art Cascaden, Ned, Hale Jones, Charles Young, or Sparrow Young to all of his many friends, and Leela Hall. Jimmy can learn a lot about safe, courteous, and considerate gun handling by watching this squad in action. Shooters crossing behind the other members of the squad from position 5 to 1 always keep their guns unloaded and the breech action open. They load only when ready to shoot. All of the multicolored patches you see on these shooting jackets don't mean holes that have been covered up. These are chevrons indicating championships won, long-run records made, and other achievements that all confirmed trap shooters will recognize. And don't think this is just a man's game. Trap shooting is a sport for the entire family, where mother, dad, and the kids have a great time. Here is the scoreboard showing winners of the shooting events, such as the Grand American Handicap, the North American Clay Target Championship, the Doubles Championship, the Grand American Women's Championship, and many others. But winning is only part of the thrill of coming to the Grand American and taking part in this colorful tournament. Jimmy has found out that, winner or not, Everyone who has ever attended a Grand American takes away everlasting memories of the experience of meeting and mingling with sportsmen who handle guns safely, courteously, and considerately at all times. Ned reminds Jimmy of this as they say goodbye. At the National Skeet Championships, Jimmy will find another such group of good sportsmen and expert gun handlers. Here he presents a letter from his dad to Dick Shaughnessy. Dick's due on the firing line now. He tells Jimmy there's a big telescope over by the clubhouse if he wants to get a close-up of all that's going on. Like trap shooting, skeet is a sport for the whole family. Skeet events are divided into classes according to the gauge of gun used. Here at the National Skeet Championships, you will find contestants of all ages from all over the United States. Watching Dick and Pat Lawson, Nelson Howard and Don Sperry, Jimmy finds that clay targets are thrown across the skeet field from a high trap house on the left and a low trap house on the right. The targets travel about 60 miles an hour, and the shooters move to various positions around the field in order to shoot at the targets from different angles. Jimmy doesn't miss this chance to get a telescopic view of Dick as he finishes shooting. And he doesn't waste any time getting out there so that he can get some practical gun handling advice from Dick and learn some more about skeet shooting. From Dick, Jimmy learns that skeet shooters must hold their guns so that part of the stock shows under the forearm until the target appears. As Dick points out to Jimmy, the rules for proper gun handling when shooting skeet are simple but important. Load only when standing at the shooting position ready to shoot, and always keep the muzzle of your gun pointed in a safe direction. Be sure your shell pocket contains only the gauge of shell that your gun shoots. Looks simple, or does it? No wonder Jimmy is fascinated. Here is where timing counts. There's an element of surprise, too, for targets may appear instantaneously or be delayed up to 3 seconds. Now he calls for doubles. As he raises his gun, he is already pointing the target going away. See those targets smoke? Notice how he follows through so that he is always leading the target, even after he's pulled the trigger. Not everyone here at the National Skeet Championships can be a champion, but all can handle guns just as safely, Dick tells Jimmy as they say goodbye. Jimmy was certainly a lucky boy to attend these big, colorful tournaments and meet and watch champions handle their guns. And he has still another treat coming, a day at the National Rifle Matches, rooting for Mary to win. Once a year, Camp Perry is the bullseye aimed at by rifle enthusiasts scattered throughout the United States. For here, the National Rifle Matches are held. Quarters are provided for the shooters who wish to stay on the ground. It's an annual event for entire families. For here at Camp Perry, you will find all types of rifles and all types and ages of contestants. There are so many classes of competition, it would take more than one pair of eyes to see all that is happening during the matches. Schools are conducted by expert instructors to teach the contestants the proper and safe handling of rifles at all times.
Ready on the right, ready on the left, ready on the firing line, commence firing.
All firing is controlled by the range officer, who gives the signal to commence or cease firing. All contestants are governed by these signals, and unless they're on the firing line and ready to fire at targets, their guns are kept unloaded with breech actions open. These are contestants taking part in the .30 caliber events, in which they shoot as individuals and as teams. They handle their guns carefully and safely, as experts always do. And here are Jimmy and Mary. They have to register first and get a windshield sticker, which permits them to move freely about the grounds in their car. Then they're off to the firing line, where Mary is entered in the .22 caliber events. More people own .22 caliber rifles than any other type of firearm. Inexpensive to buy and inexpensive to shoot, .22 rifles place the fun of owning and learning to shoot a gun within the reach of all. Here, Jimmy sees all the contestants following that golden rule of safe gun handling. Guns unloaded and actions open until they're on the firing line and ready to shoot. This same golden rule should be observed by every owner of a .22 rifle. Gun unloaded and action open when at home, in an automobile, or going to and from the shooting ground. Before Mary goes on the firing line, she takes Jimmy out on the range. and introduces him to Thurman Randall, an instructor at the range school and known far and wide as one of the best. Winner of innumerable championships himself, Thurman Randall volunteers to give Jimmy some tips while Mary gets ready to start shooting. From him, Jimmy gets some expert's advice to keep his gun loaded until he's ready to shoot. He also learns how to stand and aim, and then how to use a sling and get in the proper position for prone shooting. And how and when to load, how to sight, and how to squeeze the trigger while aiming. Listening to Thurman Randall, Jimmy can understand now why no accidents happen at Camp Perry, although millions of shots are fired there each year. And now he hurries off to find Mary, and does find her on the firing line in the small bore event. She has her heart set on winning. She takes her time and puts one in the X-ring in the middle of the target. Jimmy finds a telescope through which he can watch Mary's targets. Jimmy watches another bullseye made by Mary, and he's certainly excited, but there's still a few rounds to fire. There's the last shot. A perfect 400, Jimmy reports, but Mary still doesn't know whether or not someone has tied her score. They'll have to wait until the targets are scored officially to know for sure. Now it's official, a perfect 400 with 32 X's. And here is the trophy Mary was shooting for, and gets. Jimmy is as happy as Mary is about their Camp Perry experiences. So it's goodbye to Camp Perry. Jimmy is headed for home now to prepare for that hunting trip he and his dad have planned. And here they are. Fred Armstrong is giving Jimmy some practice shooting at miniature targets. Until Jimmy's dad shows up with his new field gun and invites him to try some targets thrown from a hand trap. Now they're off for a hunt in good pheasant cover. Jimmy is careful to watch his dad and to keep his gun unloaded and in its case too, until they're ready to start hunting. These hunting dogs, one a setter and the other a pointer, know what's coming. They are impatient to get started. Jimmy and his dad and the guide wisely let the dogs start hunting before they load their guns. While they're loading, each is careful to have the muzzle of his gun pointed safely away from the others. Muzzles up, guns on safety, and pointed correctly away from the others of the party. There they go after the dogs. Jimmy has learned to unload his gun before crawling through or over fences. Heads up! The dogs are on point. Ready, Jimmy and Dad? There he goes! Right, Jimmy, it's your dad's bird. And he got it, too. Jimmy realized he shouldn't take a chance and shoot past Fred, and also that the shot belonged rightfully to his dad. But there'll be other birds pointed. Here's an example of another courtesy of the field which Jimmy learns. When meeting other hunters, it's good hunting manners and a safe practice to unload your gun. Another rule that Jimmy learns is that when lunchtime comes, guns are unloaded to guard against accidental discharge. Hunters are constantly reminded of the rules of safe gun handling by such posters as these. Well, it's been a great day, and back they go now to their car. It's been a day of real sport. And in addition, Jimmy has had a chance to practice safe gun handling out in the field on an actual hunt where he got his pheasant. Guns are unloaded and cased, and so back to camp, tired but contented. Already looking forward to tomorrow's duck hunt. Next day, off to the blinds for a crack at the morning flight. Jimmy watches Fred put their guns muzzle up in a safe position before they shove off. Dad's going off on his own with Jimmy's good wishes. Jimmy and Fred have another location picked out. And now their decoys are set out the boat is grounded in the blind, and it's time to load. Jimmy loads carefully and puts his gun on safety. Ducks are flying, but they're all too high. While Fred tries to call them in, Jimmy remembers that shooting at high ones just spoils the sport for everyone shooting near him. But here come some. Jimmy waits, ready to shoot from a kneeling position as Fred calls them in. And now, Jimmy gets one. Jimmy's gun goes back on safety as Fred's big black Labrador Retriever goes out to bring in the bird. This is one of the biggest thrills Jimmy has ever experienced, and the Retriever looks like he was enjoying the hunt too. And as Fred pulls back to camp, the guns rest muzzle up back where they're in a safe position and where the barrels cannot be fouled with mud. Jimmy's next hunt will be for big game. Here they are up at the Preston Big Game Cabin, deep in the North Woods. Jimmy's going out to do a little practice shooting, first with his .22 and then with his new big game rifle. Plinking with the .22 is fun, but Jimmy's impatient to get in a few shots with his new high-power rifle. Here it is. Fred instructs him how to load and aim. And there goes the target. Jimmy evidently hasn't forgotten what he learned at Camp Perry. They're off for a real hunt now. Jimmy learns that it's important to know how to load and unload a big game rifle quickly and safely, knowing at all times that the muzzle of his gun is pointed safely, and also that the cartridges are placed only in the magazine and not in the chamber until he's ready to shoot. Jimmy sees how muzzle conscious these men are, although there are no loads in the gun chambers. They are extremely careful every step they take to keep their guns pointed away from the other men on the trail. He is reminded that these safety posters are not just meaningless parts of the scenery. Jimmy reads the poster carefully. Back at the cabin, it looks as though someone is getting a telegram. The messenger boy is calling for Dr. Preston. And he must know it's important by the way he hurries up the trail. Back in the woods, the hunters separate. Jimmy and Fred take the trail across the river. And under Fred's watchful eyes, Jimmy takes no unnecessary chances as he crosses the slippery rocks. The guns are laid safely aside, muzzles up and pointed away. Then Fred helps Jimmy across. As they move along the trail, Fred tells Jimmy to watch carefully for signs of game. Look out, son. Those rocks are slippery. A sprained ankle. That's bad up here, even if he isn't lost and knows his way around the timber. Back on the trail, Fred and Jimmy find deer signs, the tracks of a big buck. Now it's time to load a cartridge into the chamber of his gun, Fred tells Jimmy, and then carefully put the safety lever in the safe position. Although he doesn't know it, the messenger is crawling along a deer trail right toward Jimmy. Fred recognizes this as a good spot for Jimmy to wait for a shot while he makes a circling drive to try and head off the big buck. And Jimmy is certainly eager for a chance to get his deer. His gun is ready. He's watching the thick underbrush for any sign of movement. He hears something. He sees movement and the flash of something gray. But wait, Jimmy remembers that poster. He's asking himself,
Is it game? Be sure you know before you shoot.
and it's not game. Jimmy is glad that he did wait and made sure just what it was he saw moving through the brush. Realizing this is an emergency, Jimmy sends out the distress signal of the wood. 3 shots in rapid succession, aiming at the ground to make sure his bullets will not go astray. The distress signal works. Dad heard the 3 shots, answers with 3 to tell Jimmy he's coming to him as fast as he can get there. Dad's friend heard them too and hurries off. So does Fred. Dad gets there first and looks at the messenger boy's injured ankle. Seeing that it is only a severe sprain, he reads the message which brought the boy into the woods, as his friend and Fred stand by.
Fellows, I'm sorry, but I have an emergency call to return to the hospital. Jimmy and I must leave at once. Will you see that this boy gets back all right?
Sure, Doc. We'll take care of him.
Jimmy, I'm mighty proud of you. You've not only proved yourself to be a true sportsman, but a safe shooter. And you handled that emergency like a veteran.
Thanks, Dad. It's easy to be safe if everyone just follows the simple rules I've learned. And, Dad, it's been the most fun I've ever had. Next year, let's do it all over again.
That's a date. Next year, we'll do it together.
Swell.
And next year, as always, Jimmy will remember the experience of meeting and mingling with sportsmen who handle guns safely, courteously, and considerately at all times.
In the great wilderness that is now Ohio, most of boundaries but the Horton. The land of plenty belonged to nobody, and yet to everybody. The spring waters from which the deer drank belonged to him. The log on which the mink stretched and sunned him was his log. The raccoon jealously guarded the grapes of his vineyard. And the ruffed grouse made her nest on the forest floor and owned the sky above the treetops. Then a new creature moved in to dispute the ownership of this wilderness. Hunting was the red man's livelihood, for from hunting stemmed his shelter, food, and clothing. His life was as uncomplex as the animals with whom he shared the fields and forests. Though even in those early days there were periods of scarcity, game, including the big creatures such as bear, deer, or elk, was usually plentiful. The Indian's hunting grounds knew only the limits of his endurance and the sureness of his arrow's flight. Then from over the Alleghenies and down the waterways came trappers. Their interest was not in the land itself, but only in the commercial harvest of her fur bearers. The pelts they carried back and the stories they told of the great land to the west stirred a sense of adventure, and many were soon to follow their trails. The first settlers pushed back the wilderness and staked out their land. But the forests and streams were theirs to hunt, not only for certain necessities, but for another important reason, the recreation hunting offered. Though the pattern of firearms changed through the succeeding generations, as the flintlock gave way to the percussion cap, as the early lever action and the breech-loading shotguns were followed in their turn by pump guns, bolt actions with telescopic sights, and lightweight automatics, man, in this age of atomic weapons, still turns to the shotgun and the pleasure it represents. Unlike the days of his forefathers, the fields and forests do not lie at his back door. He must seek his quarry over the rise, beyond the bend in the road. And the road to hunting is a good one, faster by far than the Indian trail tread of a moccasin. It's a little farther from his back door than he thought. It's good to leave the main highways behind and get into the back country. Or is it? Where is the forest primeval? Where are the brushy draws and sparkling streams, the homes and travel lanes of wildlife? They're still there, but it looks you won't see them.
Certainly a nice day for a drive, wasn't it?
Yeah. Our hunting license is just a driving license today. I'll bet we're 60 miles from home.
You know, we better find a phone someplace and call the girls. They might be worried. Yes, sir. We're wondering if we might use your phone.
Sure. Step right in. How's for a cup of coffee for you?
Thank you. Well, I got 'em.
Boy, what a razzing we're going to take from them.
Your friend here says the day didn't go so well.
The only good thing about today is this coffee. As a matter of fact, Mr.
Putnam. George Putnam.
Well, I'm Bill Stewart. My friend here is Bud Walters. Smiling Bud. You know, I've been hunting for more than 25 years, and believe it or not, this is the worst day I've ever had.
We didn't even get into a field with our guns.
Yeah, it looks like the situation's getting pretty bad.
Bad? Well, that's a masterpiece of understatement if I ever...
It could get a lot worse.
I don't know, but it seems like they're making it tougher for us every day. First thing you know, they'll cut out our hunting altogether.
Who do you mean they? The state? The farmers? Me?
Well, I think you fellas have a good deal to do with it. You just don't want us around.
Part of what you say is true, Walters, but you'd think I was exaggerating if I told you some of the things that have happened to me and to neighbors of mine.
No, Putnam isn't exaggerating. Hunters, on opening day, move in like an invading army on the countryside. Though hunting may not start until later, D-Day itself starts at the crack of dawn. Tousled warriors dress for the battle. Field rations made ready. Check to see that everything's in order. And there's plenty of ammunition. Their faithful allies are always in readiness. And in the meantime, the countryside gets ready for the invasion. Barn lot stock makes poor trophies, but good targets. And there's a chance that these rare birds could be mistaken for pheasants, while a more cautious onlooker takes care of himself. The defense program is viewed with wonder from a point of refuge. Well, maybe Putnam did exaggerate a little, but hunters throughout the season are guilty of many things, and each offense reduces Ohio's hunting acres. Fences, originally put up to separate livestock from crops, may also separate hunters from their game. A broken fence post, restored, may well have a no hunting sign on it. Even worse is the wire cutter, who comes prepared for vandalism. He could have easily climbed over or under, but it was more fun to do it this way. Farmers suffer yearly losses from hunters who trample unharvested crops or run their dogs through stock. No actual damage, to be sure. The farmer can always restack this wood when he has some extra time. But if these fellows get their rabbit, it'll be the last one on this farm. The farmer can't get into his field this trip. The hunters will have a harder time getting in next trip. There goes Junior's jack-o'-lanterns and another cornfield off limits. One of the most important commandments of hunting safety is violated by drunken hunters who are ever after unwelcome guests. Hunters who pursue the back roads will find they lead nowhere, for no one fully enjoys a game at which he cheats. Trespassers are the chief hate of most farmers. Armed, sometimes surly, known to have driven farmers from their own land, they are feared, always unwanted, and in direct violation of the law. This hunter scored a hit with the farmer on his last visit, but he has a big heart and a lot of friends, and brought them all along on this trip. It looks like a pretty good party for everybody. Everybody, that is, except the farmer.
Well, that does show us up in a bad light, doesn't it? But Putnam, most of it is just carelessness. It's a fact that less than 5% of the hunters are really destructive.
And what's a fellow going to do? You get a day or two out of the year to hunt, and then just because you don't have any pull, you...
There's pull or push. Doggone it, the ordinary working man needs the relaxation that hunting gives him.
Stewart is right. Life in the city has a stepped-up tempo. There's the constant drive of competition. Competition not only for a place in traffic, but a strap on the trolley or a stool at the lunch counter. The blare, the noise, the rush, the smells, the confusion of humanity going about its business of making a living. Making a living day in and day out, doing precision work. Factory workers with little time or place for recreation out of doors. Or those in 100 other trades. These are the people, the bankers, the clerks, the tradesmen, the pulse of the city, who need and turn to the rolling hills and clean, fresh air of the countryside, the simplicity of being afield with gun and dog.
I'm not trying to say our need for hunting is any excuse for some of the things a lot of us hunters do.
Well, I don't know who's to blame for what. All I do know is I paid my good money for a license. If the state sells me a license, they ought to see to it to have a place to hunt.
Now, wait a minute, Bud. You know as well as I do, there are public hunting areas around. But in Ohio, most of the hunting must be provided on privately owned farms.
I didn't get any hunting in today, public or private. If the state-owned areas are so limited, why don't they limit the number of hunters?
That wouldn't work, Walters. Who's going to say who can hunt or who can't?
Let them figure that out.
I don't know what we expect from a hunting license, but the state really has to stretch the money we pay in. Consider all the activities they supervise.
I guess the greatest part of our dollars, though, are used to improve conditions for wildlife.
That's right. And where do you think that program is carried on for the most part? Right here, on farms like this. License money comes from everyone. Yet, for any satisfactory wildlife program, the state has to work pretty closely with the landowners.
The state agency charged with the supervision of wildlife is continually working toward preserving hunting as an aspect of American freedom, dealing fairly and objectively with the problems that arise for farmer and sportsman. Good for both of them is the multiflora rose, becoming a more familiar sight along Ohio's roads. Farmers are aware of the advantages of this permanent natural fence, which once put out requires little maintenance. The state encourages these economic and beautifying boundaries in a program where farmers have plant stock available through cooperation with the Soil Conservation Service. Once established, the fence in addition becomes a haven and a travel lane for many forms of wildlife. Birds, nesting in the thorny refuge, feed their young on injurious insects. The result of various farm pond programs is that thousands of farmers have built them. They provide farmers with permanent water for livestock and other farm uses. The ponds help wildlife and often provide recreation through fishing. Land considered worthless crop-wise can be restored to usefulness by erosion-controlled plantings. Odd areas found on almost any farm can be beneficial to both farmer and wildlife when planted to food-bearing perennials, shrubs, and conifers. Not only do these brushy areas attract many valuable forms of wildlife, but beneficial insects prefer such habitat. There is a constant and dramatic warfare being waged here, and the victories of many helpful insects over crop pests are of invaluable help to the farmer. The pollinators, of vast aid to good forage crops and orchards, are more abundant in living fence rows. The state maintains game farms for the rearing and stocking of pheasants. This favorite game bird has adapted himself well to Ohio's fields, but his natural numbers need supplementing. In addition to working with established stock, the state is experimenting with species adapted to unoccupied range. Experiments also include other promising game species. Birds are banded to permit further study of field survival and hunting success. They are released in selected areas where their chances for survival are greatest and where they're most needed. There are about 70 areas scattered throughout Ohio, identified by these signs as open to public hunting. Many of them are heavily populated with game, and all of the state's game species are represented. Another important phase of Ohio's wildlife program lies in building for the future a strong educational program in the schools. Tomorrow's citizens are taught a new appreciation of the economic, aesthetic, and recreational values of wildlife. Such a course builds toward a better understanding and promotes interest among these youngsters, which will better qualify them to carry on the democratic tradition of sportsmanship in hunting. Ohio's monthly publication, the Conservation Bulletin, brings the out-of-doors to all its subscribers. Vast amounts of material are published annually which cover specialized fields of wildlife conservation and which are available for the asking. Enforcement is, in a sense, education. It's a most necessary part of the division's program as it protects the law-abiding hunter and the landowner from the careless, malicious, or illegal hunter. Far more than an officer, the game protector is trained in all phases of wildlife and hunting and fishing, and in human relationships. A major activity of the game protector is the enforcement of game regulations. Whether deliberate or through carelessness, thousands of Ohio's hunters are guilty each year of such violations as hunting without a license, killing illegal game or game out of season, exceeding bag limits, the game hog who takes more than his share. Hunting from a car jeopardizes both life and property. It is one of the most dangerous of law infractions. What chance has wildlife against mobilized artillery? A recent state survey showed that out-of-season hunters offer a serious problem. Farmers who cooperate with enforcement agencies by reporting such violators will help check a major nuisance to themselves and to law-abiding hunters. The tracks made by these trespassers led them into trouble. A game protector followed them and caught the offenders red-faced and red-handed. Swift justice has to be dealt these men if brood stock is to be preserved, and the honest hunters are to be given a fair chance to compete for available game.
The state does have quite an extensive program, but I wonder sometimes if they're not just spinning their wheels, for it seems to me there's less game every year. Why, Putnam, you and I can remember the good old days, when all a fellow needed was an open road, a gun on his shoulder, and a good dog.
Yeah, those were the days. But do you realize there's actually more game today than ever before? That's right. And more game taken home. But There are at least 5 times as many hunters as there were in the days that you and I are remembering.
Some forms of today's game have benefited from the presence of man. Not only has man unintentionally perhaps made food available, but by bordering his fields has offered more edge growth in which game can thrive. Today, in some areas, concentration of wildlife may cause damage to crops, and the annual toll taken by hunters and trappers is a useful check on their population. Rabbits probably have more natural enemies than any other game animal. To balance this, nature has allowed them to propagate rapidly. Today, the rabbit is the most widely distributed and abundant game in Ohio. Fur bearers, such as these, have adapted themselves well to man's invasion. Bagging the woodchuck offers the hunter good sport and sometimes for the farmer good riddance. Although the value of the raccoon's pelt varies with fashion's whims, he has always been one of the most popular game animals. Careful conservation measures are increasing the numbers and range of the white-tailed deer. The ruffed grouse is referred to as the king of game birds and offers fine hunting in Ohio's woods and thickets. The big ringneck is the most popular of Ohio's game birds. Since its introduction about 1900, it has prospered in about half the state. This is due to the very nature of the farmer's land use program and the division's policies of protecting the hen birds. For without the hens, these eggs would never hatch into the downy chicks, which later become the gaudy cocks that roar out of the cornfields and thickets every fall. Yes, despite the problems, there is still good hunting to be found in Ohio. And every year, 1 million sportsmen turn with gun and dog to the out-of-doors and their favorite sport. Quartering, ranging wide, or hunting close. Sooner or later comes the freeze of the dog and the thrill of knowing that the game's at hand. Once the bird is flushed and brought to earth with a steady shot, both dog and man can share rightful pride in the teamwork which brought them their quarry. Surely one of hunting's greatest satisfactions rests in the companionship between a well-trained hunting dog and his master. Hunting dogs are being used more and more, and they've assumed an important role in the conservation of wildlife. Under today's pressure, there should be no waste of cripples or game killed and never found. The most rugged of all hunters are those who will endure all kinds of discomfort for the unmatched joy of tumbling waterfowl from the sky. Although the state can exercise only limited management over the transients from the north, Ohio hunters get a satisfactory percentage of these migratory birds. Old-timers and young, no other sport can quite compare with coon hunting.
Okay, so we've got a lot of game. I still don't get a crack at it. Well, I guess we all have our grievances. What's the answer?
I wish I knew, but I can tell you one thing that has to be done, first and fast.
And that's to stop the sneak hunter who trespasses and shows a complete disregard for man's property. We don't like him, and you fellas shouldn't like him either. He hurts us, sure. But it's your sport that he's hurting most.
Maybe it's too bad that more farmers and hunters don't get together and just talk things over, like we're doing right here today.
I believe that the farmer sportsman organizations would be a step in the right direction.
The sportsmen often extend the hand of welcome by organizing such groups. And in many areas, Farm Bureau circles are sponsoring clubs. Both sides have men who realize the importance of a common ground on which to meet, to better understand each other and their interests. No feeling's better than a good meal, or puts a man in a better mood to listen or be heard. The farmer learns that his city neighbor's problems are pretty similar to his own. The Wildlife Division has well-qualified speakers who are available on call. The division also has a film library with suitable and entertaining pictures for programs of this sort. Very often, the speaker of the evening is drawn from the club's membership. The meetings are thrown open to discussion, and it's here that the men get a chance to express their views, exchange ideas, and vote for what they believe is right.
Okay, so you want the farmers and hunters to be big buddies. I'm all for it. But I want to hunt right now, and I'll pay cash for it. I'd pay for everything else, I guess.
Outright cash isn't the answer. We don't expect payment for hunting privileges.
No, Bud, I don't think Putnam here or the average farmer wants money. I remember reading someplace where the individual could help the situation. You take the city man who is a good mechanic, or a doctor, or an accountant, or maybe an appliance man just like myself. Perhaps we could exchange some of our services in return for the farmer's courtesy. As a matter of fact, I can repair a toaster or a washing machine, and that would be a mighty small thing to offer.
It's not how much you offer. Small acts of thoughtfulness on your part can go far in establishing a warm friendship with your farmer host and his family. Let the farmer derive some economic benefits from your trip to the countryside. A farmer's biggest need is more time, and that's where you can help in many ways. Repair a fence instead of tearing one down. Put a coat of paint on that chicken house he can't find time to fix himself. Share your bag with the busy farmer, or take him with you when he can go. Give him a pup from a good litter, or send him a subscription to the Ohio Bulletin. If he's been your host during hunting season, return the courtesy. Or why not exchange your skill for his hospitality? Save him a trip to town and yourself some hunting miles. If you're a professional man, a little help or advice may mean a great deal to your host and to your hunting. The cameraman can record the smiles of a farmer and his family, which will last throughout the years. Hunters can supplement the state's program by erecting wood duck nesting boxes on farm ponds. Wood ducks like them, and everybody likes the woodies. Hunters and hunters' clubs who furnish wildlife plantings and the labor help the land, the farmer, wildlife, and their own sport.
There's no shortcut to the solution. It will take a long time to undo the harm that's already been done. But I believe we'll find the answer.
In some areas, progress has been made. Signs like this one tell a story much bigger than the few words you read. They tell of an understanding that's been reached through mutual consideration between the farmer and the sportsman. They tell that the problem, which may be an individual one, may only be solved by individuals working together. But a large number of the men in this country are hunters, regardless of who they are or where they come from. If we can't get together somehow to keep a sport going, which is as American as anything in our country's tradition, then we deserve to lose it. Or, in the words of farmer sportsmen like George Putnam,
I don't think we will. I don't think we can. We must find a way to keep hunting for us and our children and for the generations still to come.
This film is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Game Commission and a million sportsmen who contribute annually through the purchase of a hunting license. Through this medium, we hope to focus your attention on our wildlife resources, its problems and its rewards.